Hey guys, so welcome back. So now what we're going to do is, as I explained, that we will go and hit jsbin.com and where we start writing our first set of code. And in this lecture, we will not dig into what everything is, how things work. But before even getting started, I just wanted to give you a preview on what we can do with JavaScript. When you have it embedded onto your web pages, what happens? Now, even if you don't understand any of the code that we're going to write in this lecture, don't you worry. In the next coming lectures, we'll have a proper theory and practical examples so that we can go over it. In this example, I'll show you a couple of things that will make sure that you can use JavaScript in your web pages and add some dynamic content to it and probably have certain behaviors that you always wanted to. Now it is very easy to do it, so let's get started. The first thing that I'm going to show you is this empty JS bin. So the moment you do a file new, you will see something like this. Again, it may vary because in some cases it doesn't display the meta information on the head tag, but that's about it, I believe. And whenever you do a new file, you should see something like this, and this is where your output will be. So let's quickly change the title to what can JavaScript do? Okay, so that we know that this goes up here. And also let's try to write something in the body. Let's say I want to write an h1 tag and give the same header out here, which is what can JavaScript do, so that we can see something in the output. Let's save it, and now you can see what can JavaScript do got added here. Similarly, if I need to add a paragraph, let's say I can add a paragraph and I can say JavaScript can change HTML content. So let's say I already have an HTML content on the screen. With the use of JavaScript, I can change it. Okay, now how does that work? I'll quickly explain. So before even getting ahead, you always know that when you create an HTML file, the way you can identify an element on the HTML document is by giving an ID. So what we will do is we'll quickly write an ID field out here. Let's say ID is equal to, let's say, demo. So now I have a field which is called ID demo. Now what I can do is let's create a button. So I will create a button using again an HTML button tag, and I will close it using the button tag. And let me just add some content. Let's say click me to make changes. Okay, so that's my button. Now whenever I click this, the content has to get updated in the HTML. Now how can I drive that? It is very easy. So the first thing I need to do is whenever a button gets clicked, it is an event, and whenever an event happens, you can handle it in JavaScript. Now how can you handle a button event in JavaScript? Well, it is very easy. Just the way in English we say, hey, did you click that button? Similarly in JavaScript, we have something called as an onClick attribute that we can give on the HTML. So let's say I give an onClick out here. Now in this onClick, I can call in any JavaScript I want to. So usually I pass in a function, but we are not yet done with functions, so I'll probably leave it for you on a later chapter. But what we will do right now is write plain JavaScript to access this p tag. So the p tag that you see, we will try to access this tag using JavaScript and update its content using some other content that we already will give in the JavaScript. Now how do you do that? So whenever you see an HTML document, it is called a document, which means it is a file. Just like your PDF or your text file, this is also an HTML document. So the way you can access a document's content is using the document keyword. So you get the document because that's always available to you. Now when you get the document, of course there's a typo here, it should be document. And now that, remember the ID that we gave in, so you can access any element in that document based on that ID. So what we will try to do is, based on that ID, try to get the p tag. So now the way we can do it is get element by ID. Now if you note that I'm trying to use a camel case format in writing the method name, which is G is lowercase, E is uppercase, B is uppercase, and I. So many people with who already have some technical background may understand and relate to it. But if you do not understand, don't worry, I will cover this in the coming lecture. Now you do a get element ID, which is a method call, and the way you make a method call in JavaScript is having the brackets, and then if you need to pass in something, in this case I want to call the ID, which is demo, I will pass in as a parameter. So I will say, hey, Let's say my name is Abhay. So if you want to address me and call me, you will say, hey Abhay, look here. Similarly, in JavaScript, you'll say document.getElementById, by ID, and then I'll say demo, which will give me an idea saying that the demo element is needed. Now, once I get the demo element, the way I can access the contents of a particular element in JavaScript, there is something called as an inner HTML. So just like you have a p tag, it has some kind of an HTML in it. It may not necessarily be that you have text inside a p tag. You may have an indentation. Let's say you have a span inside it, or probably you have a div and then you have a p tag, then you have a span. You can have anything. Let's say I have this as a span, for example. Inside a p tag, I can give in a span as well. Now I have a child content, so this can vary from div to div or probably element to element. So the way you can access the content of a particular element is using inner HTML, and that is a property, inner HTML. And again, I will explain what a property is in the coming lecture, so don't worry. But inner HTML just has an inner HTML property, just like in mathematics. If you have x is equal to 10, so consider inner HTML to be a variable x that you can set so the content of the HTML can be updated. So let's go and say this is equals to, let's say I will give in a different set of codes because I don't want to mix the text, and say HTML updated. Okay, now I have this. I can go and run with JS. Try to click this and see what happens, and the HTML got updated. Fantastic, right? So it was very simple on seeing how HTML can be updated. So the next example what we will see is just the way we had an attribute called ID on a p tag. Similarly, except for the ID, of course, JavaScript can change the attributes of HTML tags. So let's say, for instance, I have an image tag, and if I need to change the image based on certain action, I can very well do it in JavaScript. Let me show you a very good example. So let me just quickly go down, give an HR tag so that I know that this is a separate example that we are dealing with. Now in this HR tag, let me create a small button. Let's say button, let's say turn lights on. Okay, I will close the button, and let me create another button which is turn lights off. What this will do is I'll have an image at the center. Let's say image source is equals to something. Now I have already uploaded the image, so whenever you have an image, you just need to give a URL to that image. So if the URL is local to your file space, or probably you are dealing with your web app or web server, you can give that. Or if not, if you have it uploaded onto a third-party application, like in my case, I uploaded to Imgur. This is my off state, this is my on state. So let's say by default I have the off state on. So let's say copy this image. Actually, let's copy the image address. It's on Imgur, you can use it, and I will also share the image URL so you can use it and access it anytime you want to. Let's go back, and let's say source is equals to this off image, and voila, the image starts showing up. Let's close this image tag so that we don't have to worry about it. Now once the image tag is saved, I need to write an on click to turn on the lights and then turn off the lights. Now how do I do that? We have already done something called as an on click in the previous example. So the first thing we can do is get hold of the image, and to get hold of the image I need to pass in an ID field. So let's say ID is equals to my image. Now once I get the my image, I can go in here, say on click is equals to, again I can do a document dot get element by ID, and then I can pass in the ID of my image. Once I get the my image, just the way I updated the inner HTML as the attribute, I can update another attribute called source. In this scenario, the source becomes the lights off, so I will take the lights as on. So which means I'll take the URL, go here, copy the image address, and probably put it in here. So whenever the button is clicked, it will turn the lights on. Now whenever the button is clicked out here, which means turning off the light, I need to change it back to the turn off lights, which means the original image. So I'll just copy and paste it here and replace the image contents for the off. Now let's try to see it in action. Let's make sure we run it with JS. If you don't have auto run JS checked in, you have to run it every time. Now let me try to click this and see if it works. And voila, it works. So there's light everywhere. So now we have the lights turn on and turn off. So you can change the source content and it looks fantastic too. That was easy, isn't it? So let's try to write another example where I'll show you that JavaScript can actually show and hide contents onto your HTML as well. And probably this you have seen on all your websites that you access, that you click on a button and suddenly something appears to you. So I'll show you how that can be done in JavaScript. Again, if you don't get it, don't worry, we'll cover everything in detail in the coming lectures. So let's see this new example. Let's write an HR tag so that we have another line drawn saying this is a third example on seeing what HTML and JavaScript can do together. Now, once we have the HR, let's try to write the first thing, which is let's try to write a p tag. Let's say ID is equals to magic, because you're going to do some magic out here. And now in this p tag, I can just write some content. So this is something that will show up by magic. Okay, I spelled it wrong because I was too excited to say it. So let's p tag, let's end it. So now I have the p tag, nothing fancy. Let's create two buttons and again use the same HTML. So let's create a button. Let's say on click is equals to something, I'm not writing it so far, and let's close the button. And in here I can say hide the div or hide the text magically. Again, I was so interested in saying it, I probably typed it wrong. So I have this, and let me just do a show the text. Now I have both of them, and on click of both, I can go and take this p tag and probably change a property on it so that it gets hidden or shown based on the action I perform. So let's just go and say document dot get element by ID. Now I get my magic tag, which is magic, so that I know what I'm getting. I close this. Now comes the real thing where you can access the style of a particular HTML. So with JavaScript, you can actually update the style or how things look, they appear, they do not appear on your HTML screen. So let's say in this case, I can access it using the style attribute that is there on every HTML attribute. So I get the style and I say display is equal to, in this scenario, I can give any display. So now I need to hide it. So I'll say display as none. Now similarly, let me just go here and see if it works. Let's click it, nothing happens. Well, the reason is this has to be in the quotes. Let's save this, run this, and it goes away. But it doesn't show up yet because we haven't coded anything for that. So let's just copy this entire on click and paste it out here so that we can show something. Now to show a tag or show an attribute in HTML, the way you can do it is you can use the display property again, and instead of none, you can give a block. So if you understand CSS and how things work, you know that to display any particular div, you can use either none, which means it hides it. To display it on the screen, you either do a block or probably an inner block depending on how you want to display it. So let's just do a display, run it with JS, hide it, show it, hide it, show it. So this was, very three simple examples. Of course, this can be elaborated to a big full-fledged website where you can add a lot of dynamic content, make it user-friendly, etc. using JavaScript. So that was easy, isn't it? Now there's more in store where we will learn the basics of this language, going from the syntax, where we will try to understand what the syntax is, how you write your first variable, how you write JavaScript, where you write JavaScript, how you see the output when you want to see a JavaScript. All that will be covered in the coming lectures. I hope this gives you a good taste of JavaScript, and I'll see you in the next class.